Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Authority webinar at 11 a.m. on Thursday. Toby Fox, I'm the Managing Director at 3Fox, and we're the marketing agency for councils since 2004. And we've been running over 30 events a year, bringing councils and the development community together in that time. Now, obviously, anything to do with property and development seems pretty trivial in the context of 30,000 dead. And I've read the sobering fact today that the number of dead in London has now surpassed that caused by the Blitz, which is a really mind-bending statistic. But the economy has to recover, and there are some big obstacles to overcome for that to happen. And at 3Fox, our small role in that is to keep the conversation going between the public and private sectors in the development community. And we're doing that by hosting webinars every week. And next Thursday, we'll be turning our attention to the outlook for building sites as we approach a time of easing lockdown restrictions under the title, How Can Councils Help Tackle Construction Challenges Post-COVID-19? And I hope you'll be able to join us again for that. But today's topic is digital consultation in practice. And it's more of a practitioner's session than our previous webinars. We've talked a lot over the weeks about policy and strategy, and we thought it would be refreshing to diversify a bit and look at practice, in particular the application of digital tools during the period of social distancing. How are digital consultation methods being deployed by local authorities to support transport, housing and regen projects? Are they improving inclusivity? What are the drawbacks and challenges, and how have they been overcome? Were there any unexpected benefits? Will engaging digitally be the norm long term? In tackling these questions, we've been delighted to partner up with Commonplace, which is a company with one of the most exciting approaches to developing digital engagement tools, in our opinion, and a company I'm pleased to say that we were forward thinking enough to be working alongside on consultations and conferences for some years now. So thank you, Commonplace, for making today's session possible. And on your behalf, I'm delighted to welcome a superb panel of speakers. We've got today Mark Bland, who's Programme Manager for the fantastic Mini Holland scheme at London Borough of Waltham Forest, and Paula Ellis, who's the Corporate Engagement Manager at Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. And they're joined by Mike Saunders, who's the Chief Exec at Commonplace. Now, our programme today is going to be one of case studies. We're going to do about sort of 10 minutes or so on a case study from each of our panelists, where we'll get the benefit of their experience in applying digital tools in the real world. And then after that, we'll break off into a Q&A session. And that's where you, the viewer, gets to quiz our panel and discover how their experience might inform your own engagement plans over the coming weeks and months. And we're going to close at midday, as close to on the button as I can make it, so that you can all get on with your next Zoom session. Throughout this session, we're going to be conducting polls and there'll be an exit survey at the end. So if you complete those, they're usually sort of just yes, no answers to tick as they appear on your screens. Your responses will form part of our report from this session, and that's going to be available to you along with this video through social media and on the voiceofauthority.co.uk website at the end of this session. In the meantime, though, let's get on with the case studies, and I'm going to hand over to Paula to give us the benefit of her experience first. Paula?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I thought it'd be really useful for me to share with you today some of the work that we've been doing within the Combined Authority. And as you can all imagine, digital engagement has been a massive movement for most organisations, given the fact that we're no longer to be able to engage with the public in our normal methods and channels through face-to-face contact. Some context behind this, very much I think the Combined Authority have been used to more archaic ways of engaging with our citizens, opening up very meaningful conversations in a face-to-face fashion. And I think this has developed from the fact that we all enjoy talking to people face to face and having those social conversations, and when they're taken from us and we have to engage in a different manner, it becomes very surreal and it almost feels very different for most of us, and we have to adapt to new ways of working. We last year started to work with Commonplace, an organisation that develops digital platforms, and we developed a really good relationship with those colleagues. We've commissioned them last year to undertake 2 large projects. One was around developing our spatial development strategy with citizens across the Liverpool City region, and also a secondary project around connectivity, working with Liverpool City Council around how we improve connectivity and travel solutions around the Liverpool City Centre. It brings us into sort of COVID-19 and how prepared were we for COVID-19 when that happened in that crisis situation. And it's presented us with numerous opportunities to be able to go back to Commonplace and to develop online platforms relatively quickly, most of the time probably within less than 48 hours. And I think that's been one of the benefits, because historically for us to develop consultation exercises would have taken us a lot longer to do that and to carry that out. The topic that we've chosen at the moment is public transport, and as most of you will be aware, the Combined Authority is the executive arm for public transport across Merseyside City region and the 6 local authorities. With the transport topic, we're very keen to understand, since that's been reduced, around the number of public transport networks that can operate, and also applying the social distancing rules and following the government guidelines, that we've had to reduce capacity across public transport. And this has meant that we've wanted to focus primarily on key workers and how we ensure that key workers are able to get to and from their workplace. So very recently, we've undertaken a study through Commonplace, looking at the gaps in public transport and how we can address the needs of those people who need to use it most. I think it's fair to say that we've had a great response. Sorry, just looking at some figures here. We've had a great response with nearly 1,300 visitors to our website in a week. 266 of those people made a contribution, which means that they've either commented, they've completed our survey, or they've liked or shared the information with others, which is great. And 80 people are new subscribers, which is probably the most important thing. With those new subscribers, people that you can re-engage with, people that can feed back into your CRM system and continue those conversations. So we're able, through the information that we've received, to view this real time through the dashboards, and to be able to understand where the trends are, the spikes are, and how we can address those needs as quickly as people are presenting them to us. Sorry, just looking here in my notes. In a crisis situation, as we've already said, it's really essential that you can deploy your engagement platform very, very quickly to people as they need it. And digital technology is one of the best ways of being able to do that. The co-creation of the platform with Commonplace over a couple of days has been key to what we've been able to achieve, and the fact that we're able to review and assess that data on a regular basis. So the intelligence that we get back from here has helped us to redefine those travel solutions with members of the public in a timely manner, and this has been extremely effective for the local authority. I was asked to sort of talk a little bit around marketing and how we can evidence that marketing has worked, and what we've had to do and how we've had to tweak that. And I think essentially we have had to say that we've used a lot of our personal contacts to make sure we can get those messages out. I think just putting something in the public domain doesn't always work. But what we do know is that social media is key, and that traditional emails and phone conversations are a lot slower to reach the public than any other methodology. Quite often they'll sit in inboxes, people don't get to read them as quickly. So social media has helped us, but I think it needs to be extremely targeted to those groups that you need to contact most, and to make sure that you are being inclusive in your engagement techniques. There've been some challenges. That all sounds great, that we've been able to carry on with our engagement, and there's been some areas that we've had to focus on more than others. And I think this is a common theme throughout the country and potentially throughout the world. And that is very much that we've taken for granted that most people are able to access digital technology, when essentially that isn't always the case. And we've also thought that younger people are more upskilled around using digital technology. But what we haven't considered is during this pandemic, people have been financially affected and impacted. And that means that some of our younger people and some of our communities in the most deprived areas have lost that advantage, whether that's been around the amount of data that they have, or whether it's around the number of devices that they have in any one household, where they're having to share and prioritise those devices around working from home, social activity, so on and so forth. So I think we do need to understand that while digital is a great tool, it does bring with it some challenges, and I think we need to address these challenges as a nation going forward to understand how we can resolve some of those things. I think that's been supported by the data that we've seen, that 50% of people who've been engaging are using desktops as opposed to devices, handheld devices. And for me, this signifies the fact that people are potentially using the engagement tool from work or other tools that they've potentially not used in the past or historically. It's not all doom and gloom, and there are lots of benefits also based with this. And I think the feedback that we've had through Commonplace has been fantastic, and the sentiment has been overwhelming. It's been an opportunity not only for people to comment on the services that they need mostly at the moment, but also for them to express their gratification for the combined authority and other local authorities in terms of the work that they've been carrying out, and not to forget those community organisations on the ground that are very much usually forgotten. So I think it's been a platform to look at that sentiment, assess that, and to really understand the feeling and the emotion that's out there at the minute. As I've said, social media is key, and those messages are like the speed of lightning. So if you've got good sentiment in your digital engagement techniques and platforms, that social media will grow and grow, and it will build some rapport for your organisation, it will build the brand for your organisation, and it will make people want to re-engage and get involved with what you're doing in the future. So I think that really is key. As I've said, it's opened up loads of opportunities. 53% of our respondents want to have further conversations with us going forward. 42% of those people are willing to give their personal contacts so that we can go back to them and ask more specific lines of questioning. And as I say, we can feed this into our CRM based on our fair processing notice. So the future of digital engagement, is it here to stay? I think we all recognise the longevity of digital engagement and how it will become the norm, and it will potentially grow. But we do need to consider all those other demographic groups that I've spoken about, and how we can better support these organisations in the future to make sure that we have confidence in the sample size, and that we're not continuously talking to the same people, the same suspects, the same people that we have potentially in our old yellow pages or notebooks. And learning, what's the learning that we can take from this is that Commonplace is a great digital platform that can provide us with a great response. It's modern technology that we can all get involved with, and we can share some good practice and help them to grow this platform into other types of operations that we'll need in the future. And we have the ability to share information across the world at our fingertips. So we should harness this, utilise this, and remember that engaging with citizens and communities and people at this moment in time is the most crucial thing that we need to do to make sure that when we start to build back better the future that we have for our citizens, we get it right. Thank you for listening.
Brilliant, Paula. Thank you very much indeed. That's terrific, and really interesting to hear how you're applying the tool with particular resonance right now amidst the pandemic. A bigger cheerleader as I am for Commonplace, I think it's a fantastic tool, and it's great to hear you as a cheerleader as well. Other brands exist, as they say on the BBC. Do you have experience with other platforms as well? And how is your sort of is your experience of digital consultation sort of uniformly a progressive thing?
No, we've only recently, as I said, we've been sort of quite archaic in using traditional methods. The combined authority is relatively new. We're only about 3.5 years old. So this is something that we've started to explore. We've built a relationship primarily with Commonplace, and we've continued to use that product. But I think, you know, there are other things out there. But I think if you can lend the demand of what you need going forward, and you can tweak what you have, then we can look to use Commonplace in lots of different ways. And funny enough, we have a conversation this afternoon, notwithstanding that there are other providers out there, but we're very keen to launch very soon a Metro Mayor Youth Advisory Group, where we want to speak to young people, and it's how we can use that and co-create a platform that young people feel that's their own, something that they can use? Do we start to introduce other things like gamification? Are surveys becoming boring for people? Is there survey fatigue out there? How much time do people have to fill these surveys in? Because our understanding is young people are being asked to complete probably 100 surveys a week across, across the UK. So I think we need to take all these things into consideration, and when we're looking at other platforms, whether it's Commonplace or other similar products and services, we need to make sure that they're innovative and creative, and that we don't become stale and stagnated in using the same thing over and over again, which I think is what we've done with traditional paper surveys and other methods.
Fantastic, thanks, Paula. The questions are starting to come in from our viewers as well. I'm going to put the questions to the panel as a whole once we've heard all the case studies. But viewers, please do keep the questions coming in, and keep voting for other people's questions as well. We're bound to ask the most popular ones at the end of this session. And now I'm going to hand over to Mark to give us the benefit of his experience of digital consultation in Waltham Forest in London.
Thanks, Toby. Could you share the presentation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Mini Holland programme and the use of digital consultation and engagement techniques in delivering that project. Next slide, please. So back in 2014, Waltham Forest were one of 3 outer London boroughs to successfully be awarded funding to implement a Mini Holland programme. There were lots of problems in Waltham Forest back at that point in time: polluted residential streets, lots of congestion, some cycle facilities, but by and large quite disconnected and disparate. A distinct lack of green spaces and few places for people to sit and enjoy, and walking facilities were not great, not good facilities. So these are the key objectives that we set. I'm pleased to say that the 10% of journeys by bike has been achieved on lots of the routes that we've implemented. There's still some growth to be had there, but by and large, we're seeing a real increase in walking cycling across the borough. Next slide, please. So the project consisted of over 30 individual projects. Leabridge Road was the main flagship scheme, 2.5 kilometres of fully segregated cycle facilities, and then a network of high quality cycle routes, creating a grid around residential areas or villages, where we implemented extensive modal filters to prevent rat running and vehicles travelling through the residential areas. Then a whole raft of complementary measures to support the scheme, such as on-street cycle parking facilities, secure cycle parking, cycle training for children at schools, etc. And then a whole range of cycle parking at our key transport hubs. So a very diverse range of projects with targeting at different people and lots of different requirements for those projects. So from really technical through to quite straightforward messages that we needed to convey. Have the next slide, please. So we recognised that we needed a very comprehensive and intensive engagement programme in order to capture the right information so that the project could be fine-tuned to what residents wanted. And one of the ways that we tried that was with the use of a digital engagement tool. So I think back in 2014 was the first time we used the system, and it's fair to say it was difficult to begin with, because there were lots of different perceptions about how would this work. If one resident could see another resident's comment, what would that mean? Would we create a negative sort of wave of people making comments on our schemes? But that wasn't the case. What we found was that we got a really good response from our residents, and once they were locked onto the system, they answered more and more questions, and we got some really good data back. The challenges, I guess, as I said, the 30 different projects. We needed to have a transparent and open process that could be challengeable. Local residents, not everybody was in favour of what we were doing. I think at one stage we had the largest ever protest outside the town hall. We got taken to judicial review, which we won on all counts. And part of that was due to the robust nature of the information that we were able to provide to the judge's evidence. And that was partly as a result of the systems and processes we were using. We had the Dutch minister come over to open one of the schemes, and he was presented with a coffin, as you see in the picture on the top right there. So the scheme, it was not widely accepted, from all areas. So the engagement and the consultation that we undertook was absolutely crucial to making sure that we had a robust and challengeable process, and the digital platform really helped us to do that. I think one of the other things is the fact that it's available on different platforms. And I remember when we first implemented the scheme, and one of the lead councillors we showed him how to comment on the app, and he was walking around pretty much for the next week just counting how many comments there were, reading all the comments, and it made a big difference to how people perceive the consultation. I think the other thing that was very useful as well, we were able to undertake face-to-face interviews and tie that information back into the system, and that was really important for local businesses, because they've all got their individual needs. Not all of them were able to engage directly, so the face-to-face gave us some really good valuable information. But as I say, because it's digital, you can pull the whole thing together and tie them up. The next slide. So the little map up on the left just shows you the comments, and so amber is kind of neutralish, green is good, and red is kind of bad in a simplistic way. But it gives you a very good graphical representation immediately of where your comments are coming from and the number of comments. So it just meant that we could actually see what was happening and see who was responding on a daily basis while we're going through the project. In terms of outputs, the little slides of infographics that I put on there just gives you a bit of a flavour of the level of detail of information we can extract. And what's interesting there is on the left we've got top 4 things businesses wanted to see on Leverage Road, and the top 4 things the visitors wanted to see. And the businesses wouldn't believe the information if you told them that, but when you've got digital evidence and you can support that and back that up, it tells a really robust and strong story. Next slide, please. So just quickly on outcomes and benefits. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing a lot is that the community really have got involved and got behind the schemes. So we've been able to do a lot more than we thought we would be able to do originally. We've got community groups who are now managing and looking after the pocket parks that we've put in, for example. Before it was very difficult to do that. We've seen increased response rates. So, the borough population is around about 250,000. Across the board, we've had over 50,000 responses, and that's not comments. So in terms of comments, it's way more than that. I think it was over 60 or 70,000 comments. We've had a response rate that's increased from what you'd expect, sub 10%, around 10% on the highway scheme, to over 20%. The clear results make it really easy to present the information back to people in a very understandable way. So we're looking at complex projects sometimes, so we need to be able to display this in a clear way, and the infographics have been absolutely fantastic for that. The process is robust and transparent, and and that's been proven because it's been challenged. And one of the newer things to the system is that once people are signed up, the continuity. So once they're signed up, if we've got new schemes, they can say that they want further information, and that just gives us this continual conversation with our residents, which is fantastic. And they only get, we're only giving them information they want, but it just means we've got a two-way conversation. And one of the things that Commonplace did for us is mapping all these results across the entire borough, so that we can then look at trends and issues, and we can see, so are those issues recurring across different wards or different parts of the borough, or are they just in one area? And that's been really useful. And then actually reduce costs. Not necessarily reduce costs in the way that the engagements cost us less money, but reduce costs because the value of the information, the quality of the information that we get back, means that we can deliver schemes that are much more focused on what the residents want, which then means the schemes are embraced and they become part of the community asset, and the scheme delivers a lot more. So I think costs, when we look at costs and how we talk about costs, I think we're going to look at it in the wider context rather than just the actual cost of the system or the process that we're going through. Okay, thank you.
That's a good point, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. And I guess one of the aspects of the mini Holland scheme that's so interesting now, so exciting now, is the position that puts you in to deal with the behavioural change over the last month and the number of people that are out using the streets now. You've got all that infrastructure in place, ready to welcome them. Have you noticed a big increase in cycling and walking in the borough?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the walking and cycling has been on an upward curve since we started the project, but more recently, we've got 10 sites within the borough where we permanently monitor cycle movements. They are all showing significant increases over the last 6 to 8 weeks. And that trend continues to go up. So, we're monitoring that on a daily basis. I mean, there's still parts of the network that we need to complete, but hopefully we can do that and provide people with a really robust alternative transport mode.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Now, just before handing over to Mike for our third case study, just to let you know, I'm going to be running the polls through this session, so get ready to answer some questions. There's a little bit of visual interference with this as the polls pop up onto your screens. It shouldn't interfere with the panel, but for the viewers, once you answer the question, it should disappear. Okay, over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Paula and Mark. It's been fantastic to hear from some great colleagues. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Okay, so as Toby said at the beginning, for those of you who don't know, Commonplace is a digital engagement platform for places, and our mission really is about connecting people to places to accelerate positive change. So we've seen a huge kind of spike in interest in digital engagement, which is obviously fantastic. But I think, some of the things that I've seen around over the last few weeks have been solutions to a question which is something about how do I get my consultation completed, rather than how do I build a meaningful conversation with my community and my stakeholders to achieve a better outcome. So of course, in the time of social distancing, digital has a really important part to play. But if you do want to create this meaningful engagement, as well as completing your consultations effectively, then I think it's really important to ask this question, which is about what value can digital actually add? Because otherwise, we're in danger of just trying to perhaps digitize what previously happened, And I don't think that will maximise the benefit to communities or to councils or indeed to developers for the future. So what does digital bring to the situation? I think it falls into three broad categories: trust, people and insights. And I'm going to tell you a bit about each of those. So what do I mean by people? Well, digital can deliver, you know, an order of magnitude more people than you can ever meet during an engagement. Over 1 million people have engaged with Commonplace, just Commonplace platform. So, you know, if you think about all the other platforms and social media, it's many more times than that. And it can also engage, as Paula and Mark mentioned, different types of people. So those who would not normally engage face-to-face, in particular younger age groups, but the volume and diversity that you get as a result of using digital can give you better evidence across the board. And because it's digital, you can manage that information much more effectively. You can get it in real time, you can see trends as they're coming in. And because it's digital, you can get it to kind of reduce the amount of work rather than increase the amount of work you have to do as you're doing the analysis. How do you get the people? Well, there's a number of things that you can do, and probably the most important is just making it really, really easy. Digital can be great at simplifying, and that's probably the single biggest benefit. You know, if you post a 40-question survey digitally that takes half an hour to complete, don't be surprised if you get really low traction. But on the other hand, if you do something that's intriguing and relevant and very quick, you'll get really good traction from using digital. Social proof, I think, is one of the most interesting areas of driving digital engagement. It's kind of how social media works. By demonstrating that lots of other people are engaging in the same thing, you give it a de facto reason for others to take part. It's a little bit kind of like footfall in the physical world. If you walk down the street and lots of people are there, it gives you a feeling that this is a place that you want to be. And it can be amplified by social media, as Paula was talking about. At Commonplace, we encourage sharing on social media, and I would encourage you not to be afraid of interacting in these channels. It can be a daunting prospect, but if you do engage, you'll get a very positive response. And if you don't, the void will be filled by others engaging in that space. So finally, joining up offline and online. And I know that this at the moment seems an odd thing to talk about, but I think it's really, really important that digital tools are focusing on how they can bring value to the face-to-face engagement that you will be engaging in the future, supporting that and complementing it. So what you see at the top here is our heat map. Mark showed it in the context of Waltham Forest. It's designed to be a really, really simple way of getting people to talk about an area, to express what they feel, and to give some quick and high quality feedback about their aspirations and their needs. I've got a few examples. The first one is about Leeds. We worked with Leeds City Council and our partners WSP to create a citywide conversation there about public transport and public spaces. It was an iterative process that brought a co-design element to talking about these spaces, and we had an amazing response. Over 100,000 people engaged in total, over 20,000 interactions, and we were able to help the council to join up about 25 local conversations which drilled down in their own right into those local neighbourhoods, but also provided a city-wide view of what was going on. And in the top right-hand corner there, you see our before and after viewer. This is something that we love to bring to engagements. It's a very, very visual tool that describes and compares how a space is looking at the moment and what changes might bring in the future. And then as well as our own platform, we're engaging and integrating with other platforms. And this is a kind of proof of concept example, working with ViewCity, which is a 3D model of London, and being actually able to give people the opportunity on Commonplace to walk around a 3D environment to see all the buildings that are currently there, but also buildings that have had planning consent but not yet been built, and those that are currently being built. So it gives you another really good, interesting visual way of looking at plans for the future. So the second area I mentioned was trust. You can get people, but if they don't trust what's going on, in particular, if they don't trust the process, we found that they won't stay or interact, or they might push back strongly because they're not, they don't have trust in the process. And it's a problem that was highlighted very, very effectively by Grosvenor, who did some research last year. You see the results there. I'm sure many of you have already seen this. But the converse of this is, if you can create trust, it does save time, because it saves reputation, and it means that you're not fighting against the barrier of a trust deficit. And I guess that the ultimate goal of this that we've seen is that if you create this trust, you can move people from a kind of a gut reaction that they might have to new plans, which might be combative, to a place of collaboration where they, you know, they might not necessarily agree with everything, but they want to have a constructive conversation. So trust is luckily a very big strength of digital. Digital's great at openness and transparency, and that's one thing that's necessary to build trust. It's not sufficient, it's not the only thing you have to do, but it is necessary. And I think my biggest message around this is you just have to embrace the way that the internet works around openness and transparency. It is a different way of working, but it will reap huge rewards. As Mark mentioned, in Mini Holland, it was something that the council had to work with at the beginning, but it really made the engagement work a lot better. So you'll also need to offer meaningful influence. Digital's great at this because you're not limited to a single bite of the cherry. You can present an evolving plan and you can get feedback as you go. And this evolving consultation and conversations essential in generating this trust. When people feel that they've been part of an ongoing conversation, they're much, much more likely to be constructive. And finally, as I mentioned with the Leeds example, joining up individual conversations is something which digital's really good at doing. You've heard from Mark about the Mini Holland Waltham Forest. I'm not going to talk about it anymore, other than to say, I think one of the really exciting things we were able to do there was to join up the individual conversations so that members of the community were not just partaking in one very, very local conversation. They were all also able to see what other conversations were happening around them, and indeed many of them joined in multiple conversations. And you also heard from Paula about some of the work that we're doing in Liverpool, and I'm really proud of the way that we've been able to help in a very, very small way. I'll have to emphasise that, but we've been able to respond quickly to the needs there to provide something in a short time frame window that can add value to the information that they're getting to make better decisions about how to respond in this crisis. And insights, the third area I mentioned at the beginning. So the insight you can get from using digital tools is phenomenal. They can provide a broader set of evidence. They can form decisions earlier in the process. And there's a huge opportunity to get both strategic and operational value from this kind of data. And because you have digital tools not only to gather it, but also to analyze it, it means that you have to spend less time in spreadsheets, less time using kind of ways of analyzing the data that are perhaps less efficient. So I've got a couple, one example about insight, which I think is quite nice. We worked with Lewisham Council and with Team Catford for over 2 years now, Filigree Communications being the lead on setting up and running the Team Catford project. And what Lewisham wanted to do was to find out really what the inhabitants of Catford thought about the place before they even put out a design brief for the master plan for Catford Town Centre. So we were able to have this conversation over about 18 months and got about 10,000 responses onto the Catford map. And this provided the foundation on which the Lewisham Council built the design brief for the town centre master plan afterwards. We also deployed, as part of this conversation, some infographics, as you can see there, which feed back to the community what collectively they have said. And as well as feeding into the design brief, it also enabled the council to make some quite important short-term decisions and get some quick wins. And a great example of this was that one of the things that was literally flashing red on the map was that the accessibility of Catford Station was challenging. The council knew this, but they didn't have enough kind of granularity of insight to know exactly what the solution might be. but they were able to get that through some of the data that they collected. They were able to make some remedial changes to the accessibility, and then using the news feed on Commonplace, were able to shout about the successes they'd had back to the community. And this kind of joining up the engagement circle by keeping people constantly in the loop via the news feed is a really, really important element of what digital can be really, really good at. So back to where we started, how can digital add value? I think there are three huge areas that it can add value. You can get more people, you can get them into a constructive collaboration conversation, you can use them to build trust through open dialogue and through demonstrating the process. And from that, you can get some fantastic insight, which demonstrates the shared and collective needs. What of the future? And Paula talked really very powerfully and interestingly about this. I think that it is difficult at the moment to start this conversation in the midst of emergency, but it is really, really important. And the opportunity is so much more than just digitizing what happened previously. The opportunity, I think, is to use the strength of digital tools to build on this newfound energy and interest in community, which I think can be a really positive way to move the dial on conversations about local neighbourhoods and about the future to make them better. We believe that the most important aspect, one of the most important aspects, is about connecting people to the place that they live or work. By joining up these individual conversations into something that's much more meaningful for them. And I'm really excited about this opportunity. I think there's tremendous positive impact that it can have for the future. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Great stuff, Mike. Thank you very much indeed. That's terrific. Yeah, and the thing that strikes home about where you finished there is just how the locality has become absolutely dominant in people's lives over the last month. So the importance that people attach to the few hundred square meters around their own house must have shot up, and their interest in what to do with that space and how it's treated and so on gives us there's a real opportunity to engage with local people on their environment right now. So let's get over to the Q&As from the viewers. We've got loads of questions coming in, which is terrific. I'm going to enable everyone on the panel to answer all of these questions. And we're going to start with the most popular. And I think, Mike, you touched on this, and I think Paula mentioned it as well. You've got, in Waltham Forest, you had a 20% engagement rate, and even higher, I think, in Leeds, possibly, on the example you gave, Mike. But one of the big blockers to using digital tools is that they don't reach everyone in the community. So, Mike, when you were talking about connecting online and offline, how do you go about reaching communities that don't have access to digital platforms? Can you use Commonplace to do that?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, in the normal course of events, we work very, very closely in every project that we do with the team to create a holistic engagement strategy. And, you know, what I always say is that face-to-face engagement is the richest form of engagement you'll ever have. Sitting down, having a cup of tea with somebody and understanding exactly what their needs are. You know, you're never, ever going to be able to replicate that digitally. You know, what you need to do is to build a strategy where digital amplifies, gets additional reach, creates a ripple out effect, and it kind of closes the cycle of engagement as part of this broader strategy. So, I mean, for example, we have a tablet version of Commonplace that can be used at events. It's designed for those face-to-face engagement instances. Mark mentioned it. And you can then feed the data that you collect in those face-to-face interactions directly into the same analytics engine, so you have everything in one place, and you can segment out the stuff that you've collected when you're talking to somebody face to face from the stuff that you've got when people are engaging digitally. I think, you know, at the moment there's obviously a different challenge, which is that the face-to-face stuff isn't possible. And so, you know, what we're looking at is different ways of engaging people digitally, using different channels. So, you know, using other types of technology. Social media is really important. SMS can be really important, as well as using some opportunities like sort of intergenerational kind of co-working, i.e., sort of older and younger generations in the same family actually interacting. And if you target the younger generations, then they can sometimes encourage the older generations to take part as well.
Thanks, Mike. Paula, what's your experience of sort of trying to reach the hard to reach groups using this sort of platform?
I would echo what Mike's just said, but I think for us, the vision of the Combined Authority is actually to negate hard to reach or seldom heard community organisations. And I think the only way that we can combat that is to very much make sure that we understand how we do engage with them, because actually they're not hard to reach. It's just the fact that we haven't reached them yet. And I think one of the things that we're really keen to do is look at how we can use digital technology with some of the other engagement tools that are out there. But I think we're very much reliant at the moment on working with our community organisations. And we've developed a community supplies list, which means that we can go out and do some really low value commissioning with these organisations who've already got those contacts. They're already working with those different demographic groups and their complex needs. They're speaking to those people on a daily basis. So it's about us utilising the strength of those organisations and the contacts that they have, and then matching that up with the technology. So as Mike said, they can go out there and have those conversations when lockdown doesn't exist anymore, or it's more relaxed through the device. Or even we're working now on a scheme with the Liverpool City Region Older Persons Group around digital tech, where we can actually do outbound calls and then put the information straight onto the device for people who are savvy enough to use it, using some of that intergenerational stuff. So I think it's key for me. It doesn't matter about what the tech is. I think the only way you're going to reach harder to reach groups is by understanding how to reach them and asking them how you reach them. And quite often that's through a conduit or a third party organisation that's already operating in that area.
Thanks a lot. Mark, you had a particularly, the introduction of cycling infrastructure, taking people's parking spaces away, all of that sort of, it creates extremes of emotion. And the high response rate, high engagement rate you had may have something to do with that. But were there hard to reach groups in your case as well? And what sort of efforts did you have to make to get to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what I would say is the traditional methods of engagement and consultation are not defunct completely. We still need them to get to some of these harder to reach groups. So whilst we're using a digital platform, which is fantastic, and we want to encourage as many people as we can to use that, there's still a number of people that we need to reach in the, if you like, the old traditional methods. So just because we had a digital engagement didn't mean so that we didn't also have a paper engagement that people could have if they needed it. I mean, some of the things that we did was try to encourage people to use libraries and community assets where they could get onto a computer or whatever, and then complete the process digitally. So it was really trying to do as many things as we could to encourage people to participate. I think one of the things, as Mike said, the face-to-face worked really well, and we did a lot of sessions out on the street with, as Mike said, the tablet, with all the questions. So we could talk to people in the street and gather information that way as well. And it was really a combination of measures to get as many people as we could engaged in the process. But some of the specific groups, we actually had tailored engagement programs to make sure that we got to them and we reached them. So yeah, it's not a case of one size fits all. It's kind of, you've got to adapt to make sure you get to all the groups that you can.
Yeah, it's not a case of one size fits all. That's probably a phrase used in almost every presentation in a sort of business to business environment, I imagine. But there are no silver bullets. That's absolutely a fair point. And Paula, another really interesting question that's come up in the current circumstances is regarding people's sensitivity at the moment. People are experiencing terrible sort of life situations with loved ones dying or struggling to cope with isolation and so on. I mean, in your case, the engagement case study you presented was obviously very relevant to the current circumstances. But how would you feel about going to the public and asking them questions about development schemes or housing or various aspects of growth at a time of such sort of emotional turbulence?
I think what we've established is that we've been very much in a resilience mode at the moment, and what we've had is we've had lots of different organisations on the front line trying to help those people who need it most. I think what we're starting to talk about now is very much how we move into recovery, and what does that recovery strategy look and feel like. And I think it's key to actually start to involve your stakeholders at the outset in terms of what are their needs moving forward. You know, it needs to be a collaborative approach. We can't do this in isolation, and the only way that we get to understand the needs of people who reside within our communities or work within our communities is very much of what their needs are. And that might be a phased approach, very much around what's the need here and now, what's the need going to look like when the lockdown is relaxed, and then how do we build back better for the future in terms of making sure that our strategies and our policies are fit for purpose, and that we can harness the good practice as we go along. So there'll be lots of really good things that have already been delivered or in the process of being delivered. How do we make sure that we're harnessing and recording those, and sharing that good practice, and that it's not lost in the moment, and that we revert back to doing some of the things that traditionally we would have done. So I think for me, it's very much around, you know, making sure you've got the right stakeholders on board, looking at that collaborative approach. And as Mike said earlier, and Mark, is very much around how do we pull all of that together, because there'll be lots of people working on lots of surveys and engagement that are telling us very similar things. And, you know, it's very much around that tone of voice, the wording of that information, and making that participant feel valued. Their contribution is valuable. And by going back and having those meaningful conversations, as we've already understood from people, that people are saying, you know, I'm willing to register my private email address and contact details. I would love to enter into a discussion with you. So that trust is already building, that rapport is building, and we need to maintain that with people going forward. Transparency is key. Let people know what you're doing, what you're thinking, and how they can get involved.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paula. I've been unforgivably not shouting out the names of the viewers who are posing these questions, so apologies, because you're contributors too, and to this discussion. So it's unfair not to mention your names. Kerry Taylor has asked another question, which I'm going to put to Mark, which is, how do digital engagement platforms avoid abuse and manipulation? And did you have any experience, Mark, of individuals submitting their views multiple times, or bad actors, or other forms of abuse?
Yeah, we absolutely did. I think it's fair to say the system was tested to its limits, Mike. You know, there were certain people who attempted to post multiple responses and manipulate the actual results. We also had somebody who tried to scrape the data and then change the data and present that back to us in a different form. But you know, the system is robust, and it did stand the test. I mean, Mike, maybe you can probably add something on that in terms of how the system, you know, manages to address those problems.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the short answer is that, you know, a digital platform gives you lots of various different ways to track who's responded and how they've responded. And depending on the situation, you can use some or all of those to kind of verify individual comments. In the case of Waltham Forest, what we did a lot was people were asked for their postcode. They didn't have to provide their postcode, but it was made clear that if they didn't provide their postcode, then there would be a different level that was applied to the information that they're given. And then we do a postcode analysis. So we actually do a geofencing analysis based on different neighborhoods, and we can see, you know, where the people are living within a sort of boundary, how many people responded to a particular consultation who live within that boundary, and how many from outside. And then you can take a view of the data that's being collected. And then we do things like, you know, if there's a larger, you know, significantly larger than expected number who've responded from a certain postcode, then you start to look in more detail at who those respondents are. So there's actually some really quite robust ways of doing that that's pretty straightforward. And the key thing is that the kind of analysis tools that you have enable you to do that very, very quickly, and, you know, pretty much in real time.
Great stuff.
There's various other ways of doing it, but I won't go into more detail unless other people have more detailed questions.
Well, over to Shabnam now, who may be our friend from Slough Council. Hi, Shabnam, if it's you, and if not, apologies. She's asked about how we can work with digital consultation tools with people of non-English language speaking backgrounds. And Kerry Taylor's again pointed out that in Wales, they are required to consult in both the local language and in English. So Mike, how do you manage to cope with that?
So we're actually doing some projects in Wales at the moment, and we have a Welsh version of those consultations. So, I mean, you know, in principle, again, one of the great things about digital is that you can translate the language relatively easily. Where it becomes more difficult is where you've got a community that a community that have multiple languages all at the same time. And that's obviously the case in many communities around the country. And at the moment, the best solution that we've found is actually applying Google Translate, which you can apply readily to the platform. And what that gives you is a kind of a translation that gets you sort of 80% of the way. It doesn't necessarily capture all of the nuance, but it gets the sort of general meaning across. And the reason for that approach is that it allows you to actually translate the comments from multiple different languages, so you can actually then capture the comments in people's native languages and then can translate those into a different language.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Okay, we're into our last few minutes. Next question is from Gabrielle Abadi. Temporary measures for consultation on planning applications have been put in place, and consultation measures for the plan making process have pretty much come to a halt for much of England and Wales during COVID-19. So the consultation lag between those two things, what steps can local authorities take to reduce the impacts of those? Paula, would you be able to comment on that?
This is around sort of consultation and planning applications.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the feeding in of consultation and engagement into the plan making process.
Yeah, I think the only thing we can describe, the nearest thing that we've done very recently, is we've got 2 ongoing strategic planning applications and strategies. One is the local industrial strategy, very much around people and place, and the second one is the spatial development strategy. Both are 25-year business plans and planning applications. I guess really at the moment, you know, we are where we are in respect of COVID-19, and we can't change that. But I think, you know, it doesn't stop us, it doesn't stop us sort of deploying our statutory rights around consultation, because actually we still have a mechanism in order to do that. And I think digital platforms such as Commonplace are the tool that allows you to do that going forward. And I think that's acceptable to use. Planning's not my background, so excuse me, it's not something I particularly know an awful lot about, but I would just say, you know, that we can continue to engage with people using this technology, and where we do find those gaps that have been presented with us today, there are other avenues that we can go down to support that. That's as much as I can give, sorry, based on my knowledge.
Thanks for edging out of your comfort zone for us, Paula. Rather than sort of take that any further in our last minute, I just want to get as many questions answered as possible. So Mark, your scheme covered a lot of ground. It's a big scheme that you were working on, but it was made up of a lot of small individual projects. And one of the questions from Kim Humphreys is, how applicable is this platform and digital consultation processes in general to small site-specific, maybe even private sector projects, do you think?
I think it's absolutely transferable to use on smaller scale projects. Once you've got the system set up on the site, then literally it's kind of pointing people to that to engage with it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely useful for smaller scale. And the thing is, the information that you get back, the insight, as Mike was saying, is not just useful for that particular site. I would say, it's useful for the next project, to feed into the next project and the one beyond that. So I don't think it makes any difference whether it's large or small, and that's one of the beauties of using this kind of tool. I mean, the other thing I would say for building or construction type projects as well, it's ideal because you can put so much data and information onto the system for people to view, whereas a traditional, more paper-based system, you're limited to what information you can actually produce to give to people. With this system, it's completely limitless. So, you know, technical drawings, plans, or images, whatever you want to put on there.
Fantastic, Mark. Thanks very much. Okay, it looks like digital consultation is here to stay, and that you'll be employing the platform and other platforms in this way long into the future, irrespective of pandemics. Thank you very much indeed, viewers, for all of your questions. I'm sorry we haven't got time to go through any more, but we will be recording them, and they will form, the questions themselves will form part of the report that we will make available, along with a copy of the video of this whole webinar on thevoiceofauthority.co.uk within a couple of days. It's been an absorbing discussion. It's been really well fueled by your questions, so much appreciated. Thanks very much indeed, and for filling out the polls and surveys. And it's been terrifically managed by our panelists. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Paula and Mark and Mike with a round of virtual applause from across the country, from all of our viewers, and a pat on your own backs. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you in particular for taking the time during a period when you're under so much pressure at local authorities to cover so much different ground, for taking an hour out of your schedules to give us the benefit of your experience. That's really much appreciated. And also for dealing with the probing questions. Don't forget tonight at 8 p.m. when you're applauding the NHS to spare a thought for these council employees and many others around the country who are also on the front line of keeping people alive during this crisis. And I'll just take this chance to remind you quickly about our next session, next Thursday, 11 a.m. How can councils help tackle construction challenges post-COVID-19? Thank you very much indeed to Commonplace for making all of this possible. Thank you all for watching. Until next week, goodbye from all at 3 Fox. Goodbye.
Thank you.